The year was 1873, deep in the heart of Arizona Territory, where the red earth bled into the sky and silence was broken only by the whisper of the desert wind. Along the San Pedro River, a lone rider named Elias Boone guided his tired horse through the narrow canyon trail. Dust clung to his coat, the sun scorched his hat, and his eyes carried the weight of too many lost miles. Elias was not a hero, not anymore. Once a soldier, then a drifter, he now roamed the frontier, trading labor for food and whiskey. He had seen enough blood to last a lifetime, and all he wanted was peace. But the West had its own plans. As he approached the bend in the river, he heard something unusual, a scream, sharp and echoing through the canyon walls. The cry was desperate, human, and close. Elias kicked his horse forward, scanning the shimmering water below. That's when he saw her. A woman, tall and strong, struggling against the violent current. Her long black hair tangled in the reeds, her arms thrashing as the river pulled her deeper. Without a second thought, Elias leaped from his saddle and dove into the icy water. The current was fierce. It tore at his limbs, tried to drag him under, but Elias pushed through. He reached her just as her strength began to fade. She was heavier than he expected, her body powerful and tall, easily over 6 feet. With a grunt, he hooked his arm beneath hers and kicked toward the bank. When they finally reached the shore, both were gasping for air. She coughed out river water, her chest heaving. Elias rolled onto his back, staring at the blazing sun overhead. "Easy now," he said between breaths. "You're safe." The woman turned her head toward him, her dark eyes fierce and uncertain. She said something in Apache, words he couldn't understand. Her tone wasn't fear, it was confusion. Elias raised his hands in peace. "I ain't here to hurt you." After a moment, she sat up. The sunlight revealed her full presence, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in deerskin with intricate beadwork. She looked more like a warrior than a damsel in distress. He tried again, speaking slowly. "You fell in the river. I pulled you out." Her gaze softened slightly, and she nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement. Then she looked toward the trees, as if sensing something unseen. Elias followed her eyes. The forest was still, too still. "You got folks nearby?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for a knife strapped to her thigh, still there, despite the river's pull. She stood, towering over him, and said something sharp and fast in her language. Elias held up his palms again. All right, I'll keep my distance." But before she could say or do more, a war drum echoed faintly from the hills beyond the trees. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in realization. Her people were coming, and Elias Boone, the weary drifter who wanted no trouble, had just stepped into the middle of something far bigger than himself. The echo of the drums rolled through the canyon like distant thunder. Each beat carried a message Elias Boone couldn't understand, but he could feel it, a warning, a call, a heartbeat of something ancient and wild. The Apache woman stood tall, water dripping from her braids, her face fierce and unyielding. She glanced toward the sound, then back at him. For a brief moment, the air between them was thick with tension. "I didn't mean no harm," Elias said softly, stepping back. "You were drowning." Just before he could finish, she raised her hand, not in threat, but in command. Her eyes, dark as midnight, told him to be silent. She tilted her head slightly, listening. The drums were growing louder. Then, through the dust and sunlight, 5 riders appeared on the ridge above the river. Apache warriors, on painted horses, their faces marked with red clay and white ash. Spears glinted in their hands. Elias's heart thudded. He'd heard stories of white men who crossed the Apache. Most didn't live long enough to tell them. The woman turned toward the riders and shouted something in her language. Her voice echoed through the canyon, strong, commanding. Elias didn't understand the words, but he understood their tone. She was one of them. The riders hesitated, then began descending toward the riverbank. Dust swirled around their horses' hooves as they surrounded him. Elias raised his hands, palms open. "I ain't your enemy," he said slowly. "She fell in the river. I pulled her out." One of the warriors dismounted, an older man with silver streaks in his hair and a long scar running down his cheek. He studied Elias with sharp, hawk-like eyes. Then he turned to the woman and spoke in Apache. She answered quickly, pointing at Elias, then at the river. Her tone carried no anger, only truth. The old man nodded once, then looked back at Elias. "You help her," the man said in broken English. Elias nodded carefully. "Yes, sir. She'd have drowned otherwise." The old man stepped closer. "You alone?" Elias hesitated, then nodded. "Just me and my horse." The man's eyes flicked toward the hills, scanning for a hidden posse or soldiers. Finding none, he turned back and said something that made the other warriors lower their weapons slightly. Then the woman spoke. Again, her voice softer this time. She pointed toward the trees, then gestured for Elias to follow. "I don't reckon I've got much of a choice, do I?" he muttered under his breath. The old man gave the faintest smile. "You come. Our camp. Chief will speak." Elias felt a prickle of unease crawl up his neck. Chief. That meant the woman was important, maybe even the daughter of one. He'd stumbled into something sacred. Still, refusing wasn't an option. The warriors flanked him as he followed the woman through the narrow path into the trees. The scent of pine and smoke filled the air. Within minutes, they emerged into a clearing dotted with Apache lodges, tall, leather-skinned teepees, painted with eagles, thunderbirds, and stars. Children ran between fires. Women ground corn in stone bowls, and old men watched silently as Elias entered. Every eye turned toward him. "The outsider, the stranger," the woman spoke again, her voice carrying authority. The murmurs died down. Then, from one of the largest lodges, a tall, imposing figure emerged, his hair silver, his eyes sharp as a blade. The warriors bowed their heads. Even the woman lowered hers slightly. The man was Chief Nantan, leader of the White Mountain Apache, and though Elias didn't yet know it, the next words that Chief spoke would change the course of his life forever. The Apache camp glowed under the golden light of dusk. Smoke from the fires curled into the sky, carrying the scent of cedar and roasted corn. Elias Boone stood stiffly between 2 warriors, his hands still raised slightly, not from fear, but from respect. In front of him, Chief Nantan stood tall, his presence commanding the silence of everyone around. His hair was long and silver, braided with eagle feathers. Deep lines creased his face, but his eyes were sharp and alive, the kind of eyes that saw everything and forgot nothing. The woman Elias had saved stood beside her father. Now, Under the firelight, he could see her clearly, broad-shouldered, proud, her gaze unflinching. She was no ordinary woman. Chief Nantan spoke in Apache, his deep voice echoing through the camp. The warriors listened, then turned to Elias. The woman translated her English, slow but strong. "My father says, you saved me from death." Elias nodded. "I reckon I just happened to be nearby." The woman tilted her head slightly, a hint of a smile ghosting across her lips. "The river does not take the weak. You fought it. You saved me. My father must thank you." Chief Nantan stepped closer, looking Elias up and down. Then he spoke again. "He asks," the woman translated, "what you want as reward." Elias shifted uncomfortably. "A reward? I wasn't expecting one. Just did what anyone would." At that, a few of the Apache warriors chuckled quietly, not mockingly, but as if they admired his answer. The chief's face softened. He said something short and sharp. "My father says," the woman continued, "few men would risk their lives for a stranger, especially for one of us." Elias looked around at the circle of faces watching him, lit by the flicker of the fire. "Well," he said finally, "I ain't much for hate. Saved one life. That's enough reward," the woman translated, and the chief nodded solemnly. But then his tone changed. He spoke again, slower, his eyes never leaving Elias. The woman hesitated before translating. "He says, a storm is coming. White men bring iron roads, soldiers, sickness. He says you are part of this world, but not of it. You walk between." Elias frowned. "Don't rightly follow." The chief's voice deepened, and everyone fell silent. The woman translated carefully. "He says you have a path to walk. You saved the daughter of a chief. Now the spirits say you are bound to our tribe's fate." Elias gave a dry laugh. "Bound, lady? I ain't bound to anyone." But before he could say more, the chief raised his hand. From behind him, a young boy approached, carrying a carved wooden talisman, an eagle with outstretched wings. The boy placed it in Elias's palm. Chief Nantan said something quietly, and the woman spoke. "He gives you this for protection. He says when the sun rises again, you must come with him to the sacred canyon." Elias looked down at the carving, simple, yet heavy with meaning. "And if I don't?" The woman's dark eyes met his. "Then the river that spared you will take you next time." A hush fell over the camp. The wind shifted, and the fire cracked. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Elias felt the weight of the eagle carving in his hand, and for the first time in years, he felt something stir in his chest. Not fear, not regret. Something else, fate. As the moon rose over the mountains, Elias Boone realized he was no longer just a drifter passing through. The West had chosen him for something far greater and far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. Dawn painted the Arizona sky in hues of gold and crimson. The desert stirred awake, coyotes slipping back to their dens, hawks circling the cliffs, and the wind carrying the dry scent of sagebrush. Elias Boone stood beside his horse, the carved eagle talisman hanging from his neck, catching the morning light. He hadn't slept much. The words of Chief Nantan still echoed in his mind. "When the sun rises, you must come with us to the sacred canyon." Elias didn't know why he agreed. Maybe curiosity, maybe respect, or maybe, deep down, he sensed that running from destiny never worked long in the West. The chief, his daughter, and a small group of warriors were already mounted. The woman, Taya, as Ilias had learned her name, was Herode at the front. Her long black hair braided tight, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Ilias swung into his saddle. "All right then," he muttered to himself. "Let's see what all the fuss is about." They rode for hours through the rugged desert, where jagged rocks rose like the bones of ancient gods. The heat shimmered off the ground, and the air smelled of dust and mystery. No one spoke much. The Apache moved like shadows, quiet, efficient, part of the land itself. Finally, they reached a narrow gorge split between two cliffs. The entrance was marked by stone carvings, weathered by centuries, eagles, snakes, and sun symbols etched deep into the rock. Tai dismounted first. "This is the place," she said softly, "the sacred canyon of our ancestors." Elias followed her gaze. The canyon opened into a hidden valley, where strange pillars of stone rose from the earth, each carved with ancient symbols. At the center stood a massive monolith, shaped like an eagle, with wings spread wide. The air here felt different, heavy, electric, almost alive. Chief Nantan approached the monolith and began chanting in Apache, his voice low and rhythmic. The warriors joined in, their tones blending with the wind. Elias stood back, unsure whether to watch or bow or simply stay quiet. Taya turned to him. "You carry the eagle. You are part of this now." He frowned. "Ma'am, I don't reckon I understand a thing that's going on." She smiled faintly. "Understanding comes later. For now, you listen." The chant grew louder, echoing through the stone walls until the ground itself seemed to hum. The chief raised his arms toward the monolith and spoke words that Elias couldn't comprehend, but somehow felt. Suddenly, a gust of wind whipped through the canyon, scattering dust and feathers from nowhere. The talisman around Elias's neck grew warm. Startled, he gripped it, and for a heartbeat he swore he saw the eagle carving glow faintly, as if lit from within. He stepped back. "What in God's name?" Taya looked at him, her expression calm. "The spirits have chosen you, Elias Boone. The eagle spirit watches over those who walk between worlds, the world of men and the world of the sacred." Elias's throat felt dry. "I'm just a man, lady, a tired one at that." Chief Nantan turned then, his eyes piercing through the sunlight. "You saved my daughter from death. That was no accident. The river called you. The spirits have spoken." Elias stared at the chief, unsure whether to believe him or ride away. But something deep inside him, something older than logic, told him to stay. The chief pointed toward the north, where a faint trail of smoke rose beyond the hills. "The white men come. They dig our land, poison our water, break our peace. You, Eagle Man, will help stop them." Elias blinked, caught between disbelief and destiny. "You want me to fight soldiers? I ain't been a soldier in years." Taya stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "Not a soldier, a protector." The wind howled through the canyon once more, as if echoing her words. And in that moment, Elias Boone realized he wasn't just visiting Apache land. He was standing on the edge of a war, one that would decide the fate of everyone who called this wild land home. By the time the sun dipped low over the red mesas, a storm brewed over the horizon, not of thunder and rain, but of men and iron dot from the canyon ridge. Elias Boone saw the distant shimmer of U.S. cavalry uniforms. A column of soldiers marched across the dry plain, their rifles glinting under the dying light. Wagons followed behind, loaded with tools and crates, not for war, but for mining. "They're here," Elias muttered. Beside him, Taya watched silently, her expression stone. "They come for gold," she said. "But they will take more than that. The land, the river, the graves of our fathers." Elias adjusted his hat, unease crawling down his spine. "I fought in wars, Taya. Seen what happens when folks think they're diggin' for gold, but end up diggin' graves instead." Chief Nantan stood behind them, his silver hair catching the wind. "The soldiers will not listen," he said in his deep, steady voice. "They think the land is empty. They do not see the spirits that live beneath it." Elias looked toward the campfires of the soldiers. "They'll see something if they march this way." But even as he said it, he knew this wasn't just about bullets. This was about belief, about a people fighting to keep their soul intact while the world closed in around them. That night, as the storm rolled in, Elias sat alone by the fire. The eagle talisman rested on his chest, glowing faintly in the flickering light. He turned it over in his hand, wondering what fate had truly roped him into. He heard footsteps behind him. Taya stepped into the glow, carrying a bow slung across her shoulder. "You think you can stop them?" she asked softly. Elias shrugged. "Maybe not. But maybe I can slow 'em down long enough for your people to move out of harm's way." She sat across from him, eyes reflecting the firelight. "You could ride away. Leave this place. It's not your fight." He gave a weary smile. "I've been running from fights my whole damn life. Maybe it's time I stand for something again." Taya studied him, this worn, dust-covered drifter who'd somehow stepped into her tribe's fate. Then the spirits chose well. Before dawn, the scouts returned, breathless and urgent. "The soldiers," one said. "They move at sunrise, straight toward the sacred canyon." Elias rose, tightening his gun belt. "Then we'd best give 'em a proper welcome." Chief Nantan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do not fight with anger. Fight with purpose. The eagle sees from above, strikes only when needed." Elias nodded. He felt the weight of the words settle deep in his chest as the first light broke over the canyon. The soldiers arrived, boots crunching, rifles gleaming. Their commander, a hard-faced man with gold stripes on his sleeves, raised a hand. "This is us territory," he shouted. "You Apaches need to move on before things get ugly." Elias stepped forward from behind the rocks, surprising both sides. "Easy there, Colonel," he called out. "Ain't no need for ugliness." The officer blinked. "Who the hell are you?" "Name's Boone," Elias said calmly. "I'm just sayin', this land ain't empty. Maybe you oughta talk before you dig." The soldiers shifted, confused by the presence of a white man among the Apache. The commander frowned. "Stand aside, Boone. This is government business." Elias sighed. "That's the problem with governments. Always forgetting the people they're governin'." And then the wind rose, sudden, fierce, swirling dust and feathers through the air. The eagle talisman burned against his skin. A shadow swept across the canyon, not from the sun, but from something vast above. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Even the horses reared back. High overhead, a great eagle circled once, its wings catching the light like fire. Taya whispered, "The spirit watches." Elias drew his revolver. Then let's make sure it's worth watching. The first shot rang out, and the storm finally broke. The desert thundered with chaos. Gunfire cracked against the canyon walls, echoing like the wrath of ancient spirits. Horses screamed, men shouted. Smoke and dust filled the air until the whole world seemed carved from fire and shadow. Elias Boone crouched behind a boulder, revolver in hand, the eagle talisman burning hot against his chest. Bullets whined past him like angry hornets. Across the clearing, Taya fired arrows with deadly precision, her movements swift and fierce as the wind. The U.S. cavalry pushed forward, their rifles flashing in the sunlight. But something strange rippled through the air, a feeling that chilled the soldiers' blood before they could name it. The sky darkened from the clouds above. A great eagle's cry split the heavens. The shadow of its wings fell over the canyon, vast and trembling. Every Apache warrior stopped, bowing their heads. Even the horses stilled, snorting nervously. The soldiers faltered, confusion flashing across their faces. Elias looked up, and for the first time, truly believed. The spirit eagle wasn't just a story. Its massive wings shimmered with light, dust swirling around it like fireflies. Now, Boone, Taya shouted. Elias broke from cover, firing into the ground in front of the cavalry to scatter their horses. The sand erupted, and the front line broke. He moved like a man possessed, not with rage, but with purpose. The fight turned. The soldiers, disoriented and spooked by the eagle's shadow, began to fall back. Their commander yelled for order, but the men wouldn't stand. The desert itself seemed to rise against them. The wind, the dust, the cries of the tribe echoing through the stones. And then, as suddenly as it began, silence fell. The surviving soldiers retreated, their flags barely visible against the horizon. The Apache warriors lowered their weapons. The wind stilled. Elias stood in the center of the canyon, chest heaving, smoke curling from his gun barrel. The talisman cooled against his skin. The great eagle circled once more above him, then vanished into the light, leaving only the whisper of its wings behind. Taya approached slowly, her bow still in hand. Her face, streaked with dust and sweat, softened into a look of quiet gratitude. "You fought with honor," she said. "The spirits see you now as one of us." Elias holstered his revolver. "Just did what needed doing." Then Chief Nanton came forward, his silver hair gleaming in the sun. His eyes held pride and sorrow. "You stood between two worlds," he said, "and you brought peace without vengeance. That is the way of the eagle." Elias bowed his head. "Ain't sure I deserve much peace, Chief, but I thank you." The chief motioned for a warrior to step forward. In his hands was a bundle wrapped in deerskin. He presented it to Elias. "Your reward," the chief said. Elias hesitated, then unwrapped it, revealing a beautifully crafted rifle, its barrel engraved with eagle feathers and Apache symbols. The wood gleamed with oil and care. Taya smiled. "It was my brother's. He died defending this land. Now it belongs to the man who saved it." Elias looked down at the rifle, then at the chief. "I can't take this." "You already have," the old man said gently. "It is a gift of trust. You are forever bound to this tribe and this land." For the first time in years, Elias felt something he thought he'd lost: belonging. He looked toward the river where it had all begun. The water shimmered in the sunlight, calm and steady. Funny, he said softly, how a man can ride 1,000 miles to find peace, and it finds him where he least expects. Taya stepped beside him, watching the sky where the eagle had vanished. The river chose you, Elias Boone. It never makes mistakes. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and smoke. Elias slung the rifle over his shoulder and mounted his horse. Well, he said with a grin, reckon I'll stick around a while. Seems I've got some protectin' left to do. And as he rode toward the horizon, the eagle's shadow passed once more over the canyon, vast, eternal, and free.